The first blade touched Isabella's hair like it was nothing. A soft sound, but it landed in her chest like a stone. Isabella Stuart Okoye sat on a low wooden stool in the middle of the palace compound under the hot midday sun. Her blue morning gown was already dusty at the hem. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not keep them still. She tried to cover her head, but three women held her arms and shoulders tight, tight like they were holding down a struggling goat. "No, please," she cried, her voice breaking. "Please, I beg you. Let me mourn my husband in peace. Please." They did not answer her. One of the women, short, strong, and wearing black Ankara with heavy red beads, pulled Isabella's long coily hair forward and held it like rope. Another woman raised a razor blade that flashed in the sunlight. Isabella turned her face to the side, eyes squeezed shut, tears running down her cheeks. "I didn't kill him," she shouted. "I didn't do anything to him." Still, nobody listened. A few meters away, Prince Okoye's body lay inside an open golden casket, placed on a raised platform in front of the white canopy. His skin looked too calm, too still, like a statue. His lips were slightly open, and his eyelids rested like someone who was deeply asleep, but the kind of sleep that did not wake. King Obinna sat under the canopy with Queen Petra beside him. Around them were uncles, aunties, chiefs, and elders. People in dark wrappers and expensive beads. Some women held fans, some men held walking sticks. Everybody stared. And the chief priest sat there too. His eyes were the kind that did not blink often. The women shaving Isabella's hair did not look at the casket. They looked at her head like it was a job to finish. Isabella's chest rose and fell fast. She could barely breathe. The air smelled like dust, bitter leaves, and incense. Someone had burned something behind the canopy, an old smell that made Isabella's stomach turn. King Obinna's voice cut through the noise. "When Okoye brought you from America 3 years ago," he said slowly, "against our wish, we asked you one question." Isabella lifted her head a little, tears hanging on her lashes. The king pointed his staff toward her like a judge. "We asked you if you would respect our culture and our traditions," he continued, "and you said yes." Isabella's mouth opened. No words came out. Her throat felt tight, like it had a knot. Queen Petra leaned forward, her face hard, her eyes wet but angry. "We did not prepare for this day," the queen said, "but now our son is dead in a mysterious way." A murmur moved through the crowd like wind in dry leaves. The king raised his hand for silence. "Our tradition is clear," he said. "When a man dies, his wife's hair is shaved in front of the family. It is not cruelty. It is proof. It is purification. It is what our fathers did." Isabella's voice came out rough. "But I'm not from here. I loved him. Please." The chief priest spoke then. His voice was calm, almost gentle, and that made it worse. "If she is innocent," he said, "she will survive the next 3 days after his burial. If she is guilty, the spirits will expose her." Isabella stared at him, confused, terrified. "Survive," she whispered. "What do you mean, survive?" No one answered her question. The woman holding her hair tightened her grip. The blade rose again. Isabella began to sob loudly now. Not polite crying. This was raw, ugly, shaking crying, like a child lost in a market. "Okoye," she screamed, "please, please, I don't understand." The razor came down, and then the casket creaked. At first it was small, like wood settling. Then the body inside it shook, a sharp, strange movement. A few people gasped. A man dropped his walking stick. It hit the ground with a loud clack. The women, shaving Isabella, froze for half a second, just half. And then Prince Okoye's fingers moved. His hand twitched like someone waking from a bad dream. Isabella's crying stopped, not because she calmed down, because fear grabbed her throat. Okoye's chest rose, once, twice, then his head shifted slowly to the side. A loud scream came from the canopy. "Chineke!" an old woman shouted. The chief priest stood up so fast his beads jumped on his chest. And then, like the world had lost its balance, Prince Okoye sat up inside the casket. Sitting. Alive. His eyes opened wide, wet, confused and angry. Everyone stood up at once. Chairs scraped, feet shuffled. Someone ran backward and fell. Queen Petra's hands flew to her mouth, her knees went weak. King Obina's face went pale. The women shaving Isabella lifted their blades in the air and stopped mid-motion like statues. Prince Okoye stared at them, breathing hard, sweat on his forehead like he had been under water and just came out. Then he spoke, not loudly, but his voice carried. "How dare you," he said, each word heavy, "how dare you people shave my wife's hair?" Isabella made a sound like a broken sob. She turned so fast the women holding her almost lost their grip. "Okoye," she whispered. "Okoye, is it you?" Okoye's eyes found her, and something in his face softened for 1 second. Just one. Then his anger returned like fire. "I told you," he said, voice shaking now, "I am not part of this old tradition. I said it. I said it." Isabella stood up, almost falling because her legs were weak. The women holding her let go like they had been burned. She ran to the casket and threw her arms around him, crying into his chest like she was holding the only safe thing left in the world. Okoye held her, still sitting, still unsteady. His hand touched the half-shaved part of her head, and his face tightened with pain. Slowly, Isabella helped him stand. He was shaky, like someone who had been sick for days. As he rose to his feet, the entire compound went quiet. Even the birds, even the wind. King Obina walked forward slowly, like he was seeing a ghost. "But you are dead," the king said in a cracked voice. "Okoye, the doctor said you were poisoned. He declared you dead." Queen Petra stumbled forward too, tears pouring now. "My son," she cried. "My son, how?" Okoye looked from his mother to his father, then to the crowd, then to the chief priest. His eyes narrowed. "You suspected my wife," he said. Nobody answered. Okoye pointed at Isabella's half-shaved hair. "This is what you did to her," he said, "because you suspected her." The chief priest lifted his chin. "The signs were clear," he said. "A foreign wife, a mysterious death. The spirits—" Okoye cut him off with a sharp voice. "Don't say spirits to me," he snapped. "Not today." Isabella's hands were still clutching Okoye's shirt, like if she let go, he might disappear again. Okoye took a deep breath, then another. His voice dropped, calmer but dangerous. "I remember," he said. "I remember the last thing I drank." A ripple went through the family members. Okoye's eyes shifted slowly toward the canopy again. And that was when Isabella noticed Uncle Uchenna. He sat near the edge, under the shade, but his face was sweating too much for someone in the shade. His mouth was slightly open, like he was trying to breathe quietly. His fingers kept rubbing his wrapper, panting, nervous, scared. Okoye stared at him for a long moment. Then Okoye spoke again, slow and clear. "My uncle," he said, "you were the one who brought me that drink." Uncle Uchenna's eyes widened for a second. Then he forced a weak smile. "Okoye, my son, you're confused," he said quickly. "You are alive. That's what matters. Praise God. Praise." Okoye lifted his hand. "No." That single word shut the compound down again. Okoye reached into his pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out his phone. His hands were still shaking, but he managed to unlock it. Isabella watched his face. He looked like a man who had just seen the inside of a grave and came back with mud on his soul. Okoye's thumb hovered over the screen, then he pressed a number. He put the phone to his ear, and as it rang, he looked at Uncle Uchenna like he was looking at a stranger. "I'm calling the police," Okoye said, loud enough for everyone to hear. People gasped again. A few elders murmured, Ah, police? In palace matter?" Okoye did not care. The phone continued to ring. Uncle Uchenna rose slowly from his seat, hands lifted a little like he wanted to calm things down. "Okoye, please," he said, voice trembling now. "Don't bring outsiders into this. Let us talk as family. Let us—" Okoye took one step forward. "Family," he repeated, almost laughing but not really laughing. "Is family the one that plans to bury me before I wake?" That sentence hit the compound like thunder. Isabella's mouth dropped open. Queen Petra cried out loudly, holding her head. King Obina looked like someone had slapped him. The chief priest's eyes darted left and right, and Uncle Uchenna's knees almost buckled. Okoye's phone call connected. "Hello?" A voice said on speaker, "Nigeria Police Force, what is your emergency?" Okoye swallowed hard. His throat moved like he was pushing down rage. "My name is Prince Okoye Obina," he said. "I'm at my family palace compound. I was declared dead today. They were about to bury me. I just woke up in my own casket." The voice on the phone went quiet for a beat. Okoye continued, voice sharper. "I want officers here now, immediately. There are people here who tried to kill me." Isabella's arms tightened around his waist. She was shaking again, but this time it was not only fear. It was shock. It was relief. It was anger. It was pain. Okoye pointed at Uncle Uchenna with a stiff finger. "It was him," Okoye said, "and he didn't do it alone." Uncle Uchenna's face turned wet with sweat and tears at the same time. "No," he shouted suddenly. "No, it's not like that. Okoye, listen to me." Okoye's eyes did not blink. 3 days, Okoye said, voice low. "You wanted her to survive 3 days after my burial to prove she was innocent." He looked at Isabella's half-shaved hair again, and his jaw clenched. "So what if she didn't survive?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered. Not the king, not the queen, not the elders, not even the chief priest. And that silence was the loudest thing in the whole compound. Okoye turned to Isabella. His expression softened again, and his voice became gentle but tired. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here. I won't let them touch you again." Isabella nodded rapidly, tears pouring. "Please don't leave me," she whispered back. "Please." Okoye held her face with both hands, thumbs wiping her tears like he was trying to erase the whole day. Then, far away, outside the palace gate, a siren began to wail. It was faint at first, then louder, coming closer. Some people started stepping back. Some started whispering prayers. Some looked at Uncle Uchenna like they were seeing him for the first time. Uncle Uchenna's breathing became fast. He looked around, eyes wild, like a trapped rat. Okoye stood upright now, still weak but standing. He faced the crowd like a prince who had returned from the dead, with a new kind of power. "The police are coming," Okoye said, "and when they arrive, someone here will explain everything." The siren grew louder, the palace gate rattled, and Uncle Uchenna, still sweating, still panting, took one slow step backward. Then another. His eyes flicked toward the side entrance of the compound. Like he was thinking of running. Okoye saw it. Isabella saw it too. Everyone saw it. And the moment the siren screamed right outside the gate, Uncle Uchenna suddenly turned. Uncle Uchenna did not get far. His wrapper tangled around his legs as he ran toward the side entrance of the compound. He slipped on loose sand, stumbled, and nearly fell flat on his face. The moment felt slow, stretched, unreal, like time itself wanted everyone to see the truth clearly. "Stop him," someone shouted. But no one moved fast enough. The palace gate burst open with a loud metallic bang. 3 police vans rolled in, sirens screaming, dust flying everywhere. Armed officers jumped out, boots hitting the ground hard, rifles held tight. The sound alone froze Uncle Uchenna mid-step. He raised his hands slowly, too slowly. "Down!" an officer shouted. Uncle Uchenna dropped to his knees, his wrapper soaked with sweat, his chest rising and falling like it might tear open. His mouth moved, whispering words that made no sense. "It's the devil. It's the devil," he muttered. Prince Okoye stood tall beside Isabella, holding her hand firmly now. His legs still felt weak, but his mind was sharp. Pain had cleared the fog inside him. An officer approached quickly. "Who called?" "I did," Okoye said. The officer looked at him from head to toe. He paused, confused. "But sir," the officer said slowly, "you look exactly like the man we were told is dead." A strange silence followed. Okoye gave a bitter smile. "Yes," he said, "that's the problem." The officer nodded once. He turned to his team. "Secure everyone. Nobody leaves." The crowd began to murmur loudly now. Elders whispered to each other. Women clutched their wrappers tighter. Some looked at Isabella with shame. Others avoided her eyes completely. Uncle Uchenna was pulled to his feet and handcuffed. As they dragged him forward, he broke down completely. I didn't want him to die, he cried loudly. I swear, I just wanted to teach him a lesson. The white woman changed him. She turned him against us. That sentence landed like a slap. Isabella flinched. Okoye tightened his grip on her hand. You wanted to bury me alive, Okoye said, his voice calm but deadly. Say the truth. Uncle Uchenna shook his head violently. No, the drug. It was only to make you sleep, deep sleep. The chief priest said. The chief priest tried to step back. An officer blocked him immediately. Where do you think you're going? The officer asked. The chief priest swallowed hard. I am a spiritual leader, he said, trying to sound important. This is a traditional matter. You have no… Okoye raised his hand. He is involved, Okoye said. So is the family doctor. All eyes turned toward Dr. Mark. Dr. Mark stood, stiffly near the canopy, his white shirt already soaked with sweat. His glasses slipped down his nose as his hands trembled. I only followed instructions, he stammered. The test results showed… You lied, Okoye cut in. You declared me dead when my heart was still beating. Dr. Mark's lips quivered. They said the drug would wear off after burial, he whispered, barely audible. Isabella gasped sharply. Burial. Alive, her knees almost gave way. Okoye caught her. The police moved fast. Dr. Mark was handcuffed. The chief priest was restrained too, still muttering chants under his breath, like words could protect him now. King Obinna stood frozen, his staff slipping from his hand. It hit the ground softly, but the sound felt loud in the tense air. Queen Petra collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly. My son, she cried, my son, we almost lost you. Okoye turned to them slowly. I was already lost, he said. You just… didn't know yet? Those words cut deep. The officers began separating people, asking questions, taking notes. Some elders tried to argue, saying this was a family issue, a cultural misunderstanding. The police did not listen. Truth had entered the compound, and truth does not respect tradition. Uncle Uchenna was dragged past Isabella. He looked up at her, eyes red, voice shaking. I swear, Isabella, he cried, I didn't mean for this to go so far. Isabella stared at him quietly. For a moment she said nothing. Then she spoke. You watched them shave my hair, she said softly. You watched me beg. Uncle Uchenna lowered his head. That silence broke him more than shouting ever could. The compound slowly emptied as the police took statements and escorted the arrested men away. By evening, the white canopy stood half empty, chairs scattered, beads lying on the ground like forgotten promises. Prince Okoye sat on the steps of the palace with Isabella. Beside him, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky orange and red. It should have been peaceful, but nothing felt normal anymore. A palace maid brought water. Isabella drank slowly. Her hands still trembled when she lifted the cup. Okoye watched her quietly. I'm sorry, he said at last. Isabella looked at him confused. Sorry for what? For bringing you here, he said. For telling you things would be different. For believing love alone could protect you. She reached for his hand. I chose you, she said gently. I still choose you. He closed his eyes briefly. That sentence held him together. King Obinna approached them slowly, walking like an old man who had aged 10 years in one day. Queen Petra followed behind him. They stopped in front of Isabella. The king lowered himself to his knees. Gasps filled the courtyard. Queen Petra knelt too, tears soaking her lace wrapper. We are sorry, the king said, his voice broken. We allowed fear to blind us. We allowed evil men to mislead us. The 3 women who shaved Isabella's hair stepped forward and knelt as well. Forgive us, one of them cried. We were told it was tradition. Isabella froze. This was not what she expected. She stood slowly. Her half-shaved hair brushed her shoulders unevenly. The wind touched her bare scalp gently, like the world itself was apologizing. She looked at them. Then she looked at Okoye, then back at the kneeling figures. Please stand up, Isabella said softly. They hesitated. I forgive you, she continued, voice trembling but steady, not because what you did was right, but because hatred will only destroy all of us. Tears fell freely now. Even the king cried openly. That night, the palace felt different. Quieter, heavy. No drums played, no chants echoed. Prince Okoye could not sleep. He lay awake beside Isabella, listening to her breathing, watching the ceiling, replaying everything again and again in his mind. "I almost died," he whispered into the darkness. Isabella turned toward him. "But you didn't," she said. "You're here." "I could have been buried alive," he said, "by my own people." Isabella reached out and touched his face. "And now you see clearly." He nodded slowly. Yes, he did. The next morning, the palace gates opened early. News had spread like wildfire. A prince rose from his coffin. A burial turned into an arrest. A foreign wife was almost punished for a crime she didn't commit. Journalists gathered outside. Police vehicles moved in and out. Prince Okoye refused to speak to the press, but the court spoke loudly. Uncle Uchenna, the chief priest, Dr. Mark. They were arraigned before a judge in Lagos. Charges were read clearly: attempted murder, conspiracy, betrayal of trust, professional misconduct. Dr. Mark's medical license was withdrawn immediately. When the Yala judge pronounced life imprisonment, the courtroom went silent. Uncle Uchenna screamed. The chief priest collapsed. Dr. Mark wept quietly. Too late. Back at the palace, life continued, but nothing was the same. King Obinna grew weaker by the day. The weight of guilt sat heavily on his chest. Queen Petra rarely left his side. Prince Okoye began handling palace matters. He listened more than he spoke. People noticed. They respected him. But inside him, something was unsettled. One evening, he sat with Isabella under the mango tree in the courtyard. "I don't think we belong here," he said suddenly. Isabella looked up. "What do you mean?" "They never wanted you," he said. "And maybe they never will." Silence followed. Then Isabella spoke gently. "Where would we go?" "America," Okoye said. "Start fresh, somewhere safe." She studied his face. "I will go anywhere with you," she said. "But running will not heal this." "Place," he frowned. "You're willing to stay? After everything?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, because love does not grow in comfort. It grows where it is tested." Those words stayed with him. That night, King Obinna called Okoye to his room. The king lay weak on the bed, his breathing shallow. "My son," he whispered, "I hear you plan to leave." Okoye nodded. "I don't want Isabella to suffer again." Queen Petra wept softly. "Please stay," she begged. "Help us make things right." Okoye did not answer immediately. Later that night, Isabella spoke again. "This is your home," she said, "and if you choose to stay, I will stand beside you." Okoye looked at her for a long time. That was all he needed. 2 days later, King Obinna died peacefully in his sleep. The palace fell into mourning again. But this time, no lies followed, no blades, no injustice. After the burial, Prince Okoye was crowned king, and Isabella stood beside him. Queen Petra placed the crown on his head with trembling hands. The crowd cheered, but Okoye's mind was already focused on something else. Change. Far away in the United States, Mr. Donald Stewart and Mrs. Eli Donald boarded a flight to Lagos. They had not supported Isabella's marriage. They had warned her. Now, they were coming to see the truth. The plane touched down. Royal guards waited, and as the convoy moved toward the palace, Isabella held Okoye's hand tightly. Her parents were coming, and she did not know what they would say, or what they would feel. The palace gates opened wide, drums began to sound, and as the convoy rolled in, Mr. and Mrs. Stewart stared at the transformed community. New schools, a clinic under construction, clean water flowing where none existed before. Mrs. Stewart's eyes filled with tears. "Is this because of our daughter?" she whispered. Mr. Stewart said nothing. His throat was tight. Inside the palace, Isabella waited, heart pounding. Because forgiveness, she was learning, is not a single moment. It is a journey. And this one was just beginning. As Isabella stepped forward to greet her parents, her mother suddenly stopped walking. Her face changed. Her eyes locked onto Isabella's half-grown hair. And she whispered one sentence that made Isabella's chest tighten. "What did they do to you?" Mrs. Eli Stewart's voice was low, but it cut through the celebration like a blade. The palace courtyard, moments ago filled with drums and soft ululations, went quiet. Not suddenly. Slowly. Like people sensed something fragile had stepped into the open. Isabella froze. Her mother stood just a few steps away, dressed in a cream travel suit, her brown hair pulled back neatly the way Isabella remembered from childhood. Her eyes, those same eyes Isabella had inherited, were fixed on Isabella's head. On the uneven hair, on the part that had not yet grown back. On the truth. Isabella had tried to hide behind smiles. Mr. Donald Stewart stood beside his wife, tall and stiff, his hands clenched at his sides. He followed his wife's gaze, and then his face changed. "Isabella?" he said carefully. "What happened?" Isabella opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The sound of drums faded completely. Even the palace guards shifted uneasily. Queen Petra stood a little behind Okoye, watching, her eyes full of regret. Okoye stepped forward instinctively. "She is safe," he said quickly. "She is respected here." Mrs. Stewart looked at him. Her eyes were polite but cold. "That's not what I asked," she said. She turned back to her daughter. "What happened to your hair?" Isabella swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stand straight. "They thought," she began, then stopped. Her throat tightened. "They thought I killed my husband." The words fell heavily into the courtyard. Mrs. Stewart gasped loudly and took a step back like someone had pushed her. "What?" she exclaimed. "That's insane." Mr. Stewart's face hardened. "Who thought that?" he demanded. No one answered immediately. Isabella looked down at the ground. The interlocking tiles beneath her feet suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. Okoye spoke then, slowly, carefully. "My uncle," he said, "the chief priest, and the family doctor." Mr. Stewart laughed once, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "And people listened to them?" he asked. Some elders shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Stewart's voice shook. "They shaved her hair." Isabella nodded. "They were going to do worse," she said quietly. But Okoye woke up. Mrs. Stewart stared at her daughter for a long moment. Then her legs gave way. Mr. Stewart caught her just in time. "Eli!" he cried. People rushed forward, chairs were pulled, water was brought. As Mrs. Stewart sat, shaking, tears poured freely down her cheeks. "I warned you," she sobbed. "I warned you, Isabella. I told you this place would swallow you." Isabella knelt in front of her mother, gently holding her hands. "I know," she said softly, "but I also know that not everyone here is the same." Mrs. Stewart shook her head, crying harder now. "They humiliated you," she whispered. "They stripped you to prove something they invented." Isabella did not deny it. Mr. Stewart turned to Okoye, his voice low and controlled. "You're a king now," he said. "But when this happened, where were you?" Okoye held his gaze. "I was lying in a coffin," he said. "Drugged. Declared dead." Mr. Stewart's jaw tightened. "And if you hadn't woken up?" he asked. Okoye did not answer immediately. Because the answer was ugly. Because everyone knew it. Queen Petra stepped forward then, her voice trembling. "We failed her," she said, "all of us. And we are ashamed." Mr. Stewart looked at her, long, hard. "Shame does not undo trauma," he said. Queen Petra bowed her head. "I know." Silence stretched between them, the kind of silence that forces truth to breathe. Later that evening, Isabella sat with her parents in a quiet room inside the palace. The windows were open. Night insects hummed outside. A soft lantern glowed on the table. Mrs. Stewart held Isabella's hands tightly, like she was afraid her daughter might disappear. "Did you cry?" she asked suddenly. Isabella nodded. "Did you beg?" her mother asked again. Isabella hesitated, then nodded again. Mrs. Stewart pulled her into a tight embrace and wept openly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I let you walk into this alone." Mr. Stewart stood near the window, staring out at the dark compound. His shoulders were stiff. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. Isabella looked at him. "Because you already didn't support." Us, she said gently, and I didn't want to say I told you so to myself. Mr. Stewart closed his eyes. For a long time, no one spoke. Then he turned. Are you happy? He asked her. Isabella thought carefully before answering. Yes, she said. I am. He studied her face, not the hair, the eyes, the strength. Then he nodded slowly. Then we will learn, he said, just like you did. Across the palace, Okoye sat alone in his late father's study. The room still smelled faintly of old books and wood polish. King Obina's chair stood empty behind the desk. Okoye rested his elbows on his knees. He was king now, but tonight he felt like a man still learning how to protect the people he loved. Queen Petra entered quietly. You handled that well, she said. Okoye sighed. I didn't protect her when it mattered most. You were drugged, she said. That was not your fault. Okoye shook his head. Leadership is not about excuses. Queen Petra sat beside him. There are many elders who still believe Isabella is the reason all this happened, she admitted softly. Okoye's eyes sharpened. Then they have not learned anything. She looked at him with worry. Change will not be easy. I know, he said. That's why it must be done. The following weeks brought visible transformation. Construction resumed faster on the community clinic. Teachers were hired for the new school. Medical outreach programs were announced publicly. Free treatment, no discrimination. People watched, some with hope, some with suspicion. Isabella worked quietly beside Okoye. She visited women in the village. She listened more than she spoke. She learned names. She learned pain. One afternoon, an elderly woman touched Isabella's hair gently. It will grow, the woman said kindly, and even if it doesn't, you are still whole. Isabella smiled. Yes, she said, I am. But not everyone smiled. Whispers followed Isabella in certain corners. She brought trouble. She changed our prince. Things were simpler before. One night, Okoye found a symbol scratched into the palace gate. An old mark, a warning. He stared at it silently. The past, it seemed, was not done speaking. One evening, Isabella stood alone in the palace garden, watching the moon reflect off the pond. The air was calm. Too calm. She sensed someone behind her before she heard footsteps. She turned. A young palace aide stood there, nervous. My queen, he said softly. There's something you should know. Her heart skipped. What is it? She asked. He hesitated. Some elders are meeting secretly tonight, he said. They believe the change is dangerous. Isabella's stomach tightened. Dangerous how? They say, he lowered his voice, that what happened at the burial was a bad omen. Isabella thanked him and dismissed him. She did not sleep that night. At dawn, she told Okoye everything. He listened without interruption. Then he stood up. Call the council, he said. Isabella touched his arm. Be careful. He looked at her. I won't let fear rule this palace again. The council gathered that afternoon. Faces stern, voices controlled. An elder stood. Our traditions are dying, he said. Our authority is fading. Okoye stood slowly. No, he replied. What is dying is injustice. Murmurs filled the hall. You married a foreign woman, another elder said, and disaster followed. Okoye's eyes flashed. Disaster followed because evil men were allowed to hide behind tradition, he said, and I will not allow it again. Tension rose like heat. Then a messenger burst into the hall. Your Majesty, he cried, we have news. Okoye turned sharply. What news? The messenger swallowed. They say, Uncle Uchenna has fallen, ill in prison, very ill. The room went quiet. Isabella felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. Poison, someone whispered. The messenger shook his head. They say he keeps shouting your name, and the chief priest's. Okoye frowned. What does that mean? The messenger hesitated. He says, there's more to tell. Isabella and Okoye exchanged a look. More? What more? The past, it seemed, still had secrets buried deeper than a coffin, and they were beginning to rise. As Okoye ordered the prison visit, Isabella felt a sudden heavy fear settle in her chest, because if Uncle Uchenna was talking now, it meant the truth they knew was only half the story. and whatever was still hidden was dangerous enough to make a dying man speak. The prison was smelling of rust and sweat. Isabella felt it the moment she stepped out of the car. The air was heavy, thick with something that sat in the lungs and refused to leave. High concrete walls rose, on all sides, crowned with coils of wire that caught the sun like metal thorns. Okoye held her hand firmly. "Stay close," he said quietly. She nodded. They were escorted down a narrow corridor by 2 armed officers. Each step echoed too loudly, as if the building itself was listening. When they reached the infirmary, the officer stopped and unlocked a door. "He's inside," he said. "But be quick, he's not stable." Okoye's jaw tightened. They stepped in. Uncle Uchenna lay on a narrow bed, his body thinner than Isabella remembered. His once bold face had sunken in, cheeks hollow, eyes too large for his skull. Tubes ran from his arm into hanging bags of fluid. His lips were dry and cracked. He looked small, weak. When his eyes opened and landed on Okoye, fear flashed across his face like lightning. "Okoye," he croaked. "You came." Okoye did not move closer. "You said you had more to tell," he said evenly. Uncle Uchenna swallowed with difficulty. His eyes shifted to Isabella, then back to Okoye. "She should hear it too," he whispered. "She deserves to." Isabella's heart beat harder. Okoye nodded once. "Speak." Uncle Uchenna took a shaky breath. "It wasn't just jealousy," he said slowly. "It wasn't only about you marrying her." Isabella's fingers tightened around Okoye's. "What else?" Okoye asked. Uncle Uchenna's eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that when you became king, you would expose everything." Okoye frowned. "Expose what?" Uncle Uchenna let out a weak, broken laugh. "The past," he said. "The things we buried before you were old enough to understand." Silence filled the room. Isabella felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Years ago," Uncle Uchenna continued, "your father trusted me with palace funds, development funds, money meant for schools, hospitals." Okoye's chest tightened. "You stole it," he said flatly. Uncle Uchenna nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "Not alone. Others helped, elders, chiefs, even the chief priest." Isabella's breath caught. "And when you married her," Uncle Uchenna said, looking at Isabella now, "you started asking questions. About records, about transparency, about where money went." Okoye remembered. The arguments, the resistance, the quiet anger. "They knew," Uncle Uchenna said, voice shaking, "that once you sat on the throne, everything would come out." Okoye clenched his fists. "So you decided to kill me?" Uncle Uchenna shook his head weakly. "Not kill," he whispered. "Remove. Silence. Make it look like fate. Tradition. A curse." Isabella felt sick. "You used me," she said softly. Uncle Uchenna met her eyes, tears spilling freely now. "Yes," he said, "you were the easiest target." Isabella closed her eyes briefly. The words hurt more than the blade ever had. Okoye took a deep breath, forcing calm into his voice. "Who else is involved?" he asked. Uncle Uchenna hesitated. Okoye leaned forward slightly. "Tell the truth," he said. "You have nothing left to protect." Uncle Uchenna exhaled shakily. "2 senior chiefs," he whispered, "and 1 elder from the western wing of the council." Okoye's eyes darkened. Names followed. Each one felt like another stone added to his chest. Uncle Uchenna's breathing became labored. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quickly. "I know it's too late." Isabella looked at him quietly. "Why tell us now?" she asked. Uncle Uchenna's voice broke. "Because I don't want to die carrying this poison," he whispered. "And because I was wrong about you." He looked at Isabella again. "You didn't destroy our culture," he said. "You exposed our rot." Tears rolled down his face unchecked. Moments later, his breathing slowed. The monitor beeped once, then flatlined. The doctor rushed in, but it was already over. Uncle Uchenna was dead. Isabella felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, and something close to pity. Okoye stood silently, staring at the body. The truth had been spoken, but the damage remained. Back at the palace, Okoye called an emergency council meeting. This time, the room felt different. The air was tense, suspicious. Okoye stood at the center, Isabella seated beside him, calm and composed. He spoke clearly. "Today," he said, "we begin a full audit of palace funds, past and present." Gasps rippled through the hall. "You cannot," one chief began. "I can," Okoye interrupted, "and I will." The names Uncle Uchenna had mentioned weighed heavily on the room. Some faces went pale, some eyes avoided contact. "You will cooperate," Okoye continued, "or you will answer to the law." Silence followed. Queen Petra watched her son with quiet pride. That night, Isabella sat alone in their chambers, brushing her hair slowly. The uneven strands caught in the brush, reminding her of everything. Okoye entered quietly. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "I don't know," she said honestly. He sat beside her. "You didn't deserve any of this," he said. She gave a small, tired smile. "Neither did you." They sat in silence for a while. Then Isabella spoke again. "I was scared today," she admitted. "Not of him, of what else might still be hidden." Okoye nodded. "There are always layers," he said, "but we'll peel them back." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I trust you," she said. Those words grounded him. The following weeks were difficult. Investigations led to arrests. Funds were traced. Corruption was exposed publicly. Some elders lost their titles. Some families lost their influence. The community was shaken, but something stronger replaced the fear. Hope. Children returned to school. The clinic opened its doors. Isabella oversaw women's programs quietly, without speeches or attention. People began to see her differently, not as a foreigner, but as a presence. One afternoon, Isabella received a call from her mother. "I'm proud of you," Mrs. Stewart said softly. Isabella smiled. "That means a lot," she replied. Mr. Stewart took the phone next. "We were wrong," he admitted. "About him. About this place." Isabella closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you," she said, "but peace is fragile." One evening, as Isabella prepared to sleep, she noticed something under the door. A folded piece of paper. No name, no seal. Just words written in red ink. She opened it slowly. Some traditions do not die quietly. Her heart skipped. She handed the note to Okoye immediately. His expression darkened. "They're not done," he said quietly. "No," Isabella replied. "They're afraid." Okoye looked at her, surprised. She met his gaze steadily. "Fear makes people dangerous," she said, "but it also makes them careless." Okoye smiled slightly. "You've learned fast." She shrugged. "Pain is a teacher." They did not sleep much that night. The next morning, Okoye called for increased security, but he also made a decision. "We will hold a public address," he said. Isabella frowned. "Is that safe?" "It's necessary," he replied. "Silence creates rumors." The day of the address, the palace square filled with people. Okoye stood tall. Isabella stood beside him. He spoke openly about corruption, about justice, about the need to separate culture from cruelty. Some people cheered. Some watched silently. At the edge of the crowd, a hooded figure stood still, watching, listening, hands clenched. As Okoye finished speaking, Isabella felt it again. That heavy feeling, like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. She whispered to Okoye, "Something's coming." He nodded slightly. "Yes," he said, "and when it does, we'll be ready." That night, as the palace lights dimmed, a loud explosion echoed from the far end of the community, near the new clinic. Isabella bolted upright in bed. Okoye was already on his feet. Smoke rose into the night sky, and the sound of distant screams followed. The past was not finished, and it had chosen fire this time. The explosion came again, not louder this time, but closer. The palace windows rattled. Somewhere in the distance, a woman screamed. Then another voice, then shouting. Confusion moved faster than smoke. Okoye grabbed his jacket and sword belt in one motion. He did not put on the crown. Tonight, authority did not need gold. "Lock the inner gates," he ordered the guards already running past the corridor. "No one leaves the palace." Isabella tied her robe tightly around herself and followed him. "Stay here," Okoye said quickly. Turning back to her, she shook her head. "I'm not hiding anymore." Their eyes met. He saw fear there, but also resolve. "All right," he said, "stay close to me." They ran. Outside, the night was alive with chaos. Smoke rose from the direction of the new community clinic, thick, dark, angry. Flames licked the sky like fingers trying to pull it down. People ran barefoot across the compound road. Mothers clutched children. Men shouted orders that overlapped and collided. Okoye mounted a horse, brought quickly by a guard. "Form a line," he shouted. "Protect the people first." Isabella climbed behind him without hesitation. The horse surged forward. As they rode toward the fire, Isabella's mind raced, not with panic, but with memory. The razor blade, the coffin, the silence when no one listened. This fire was not random. It was a message. By the time they reached the clinic, the damage was clear. One wing burned badly. The roof had collapsed inward. Windows were shattered. Smoke poured out like breath from a wounded animal. But the building still stood. Villagers were already forming lines, passing buckets of water from the nearby stream. Someone had brought a small fire engine from the next town. Isabella jumped down and immediately began helping, directing women away from danger, guiding injured children toward safety. Okoye dismounted and surveyed the scene, his face tight. "Any casualties?" he demanded. "A few burns," a guard reported. "No deaths, thank God." Okoye exhaled sharply. Then he saw it, sprayed across the remaining wall of the clinic in red paint. A symbol, the same one that had been scratched into the palace gate weeks earlier. Okoye's jaw clenched. "They want to scare us," Isabella said quietly beside him. "Yes," he replied, "and tonight they failed. But failure does not stop desperate people. It only makes them reckless." The next morning, the entire community gathered, not under a white canopy, not for burial, but for truth. The fire had burned fear into the open, and once fear is visible, it can no longer pretend to be tradition. Okoye stood before the crowd, no crown, no throne, just a man speaking to his people. "They burned a clinic," he said, "a place meant to heal children." Murmurs moved through the crowd. "They did it to silence change," he continued, "to scare us back into obedience." Isabella stepped forward. Her hair was growing unevenly now. She did not cover it. "They shaved my hair to test my innocence," she said, voice clear, "and when that failed, they tried fire. People listened, really listened." "You were told these things were tradition," Isabella continued, "but tradition does not demand blood. It does not demand fear. It does not punish love." An old man in the crowd raised his hand slowly. "What then is tradition?" he asked. Okoye answered, "Tradition is wisdom," he said, "and wisdom grows, or it dies." Silence followed. Then applause. Slow at first, then louder. Investigations moved fast after that. Fear loosened tongues. A night watchman confessed to being paid to leave his post. A local painter admitted to being hired to draw the symbol. Names surfaced. Connections were made. By the end of the week, 3 more arrests were made. The fire had not destroyed the clinic. It had exposed the last layer of rot. Days later, the clinic reopened, brighter, stronger, with Isabella cutting the ribbon, not as a queen, but as a witness. As children ran through the compound laughing, Isabella felt something she had not felt since that burial day. Peace, not the fragile kind, the earned kind. That evening, Okoye and Isabella sat together under the mango tree, where everything had once felt uncertain. The air was calm. The stars were clear. "You could still leave," Okoye said softly. "America is always an option." Isabella smiled gently. "I know," she said, "but this is home now." He studied her face, the strength, the quiet bravery. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. She reached for his hand. "You already did," she replied. "You stood up when it mattered." They sat in silence for a moment, then Okoye spoke again. "There is something I've learned," he said. "What?" she asked. "That power without courage becomes cruelty," he said. And courage without love becomes violence. Isabella nodded. And love without voice becomes suffering. They shared a small smile. Weeks later, Queen Petra called Isabella into her chamber. The queen looked older now, but lighter, less burdened. You changed us, Queen Petra said softly. Isabella shook her head. You changed yourselves. Queen Petra reached out and touched Isabella's growing hair gently. It will grow back, she said, but what you grew, here, she tapped her chest, will last longer. Isabella swallowed. News of the event spread far beyond the community. Journalists came again, but this time Okoye spoke. He spoke about reform, about justice, about protecting culture by protecting people. He spoke about his wife. She was punished for loving me, he said publicly, and she forgave those who hurt her. That is strength. The world listened. One afternoon, Isabella received a letter, handwritten, from a woman she did not recognize. I was one of the women who held you down, the letter read. I believed fear was obedience. I was wrong. I am teaching my daughters differently. Isabella read it twice, then she cried. Not from pain, from release. Months passed. The palace settled into a new rhythm. Development continued. Education expanded. Old men who once whispered now spoke openly, or not at all. Change had found roots. One night, Isabella stood alone in the palace courtyard, looking at the place where the casket had once stood. The memory was still sharp, but it no longer owned her. Okoye joined her. Thinking, he asked. Yes, she said, about how close everything came to ending. He nodded. And how close it came to beginning. She smiled faintly. Do you think people will ever fully accept me? She asked. Okoye considered the question. Some will, he said, some won't, but acceptance is not the goal. What is? She asked. Respect, he replied, and that you already have. She leaned into him. This story teaches that tradition without humanity becomes oppression, that fear wears many disguises, culture, loyalty, even faith, and that real leadership is not proven in comfort, but in moments when silence would be easier. Isabella's strength was not in fighting back, but in standing firm without becoming cruel. Okoye's growth was not in wearing a crown, but in removing the lies beneath it. And sometimes the dead do not rise to haunt us. They rise to expose the truth. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.